Welcome to this video, which hopefully will help students in writing the Java program using the message input dialog boxes. If you have not done the first program in this assignment, you probably need to refer to that video before watching this one, unless you have a comfort level already. Again, I'll make this very brief for you. You need to start these programs early and often and not wait until the last minute so that you have to ask for a miracle. It just doesn't work in a programming or logic-oriented class. You must use your Java software, not a word processor, not a PDF file. It must come from the Java software because it's designed to execute computer programs that are written in code, the language being called Java. Word is designed to write papers and documents and flyers. It's not designed for writing programs. I can tell which you've used because Word will try to change punctuation and show all kinds of corrections and stuff like that. So use your software, which you should have already downloaded to your, downloaded to your computer. In this particular case, number 2 says to use your Java software to write a program that asks the user to input his or her name from an input dialog box. That's very different from keyboard input. It's not hard, but it's different. You should use a second dialog box to enter the cost of a computer, and a third dialog box to get the tax rate. Once you've done that, you calculate the total cost of the computer plus tax, just like you would in a store, and display the person's name and the cost in a message dialog box. You don't want this to be rigged. Don't think of a number like $500, 5%, and then write directly. The total is $525 or whatever it is. You don't want to rig the program. It should work for any numbers that I type in when I'm looking at that, because when I grade your programs, I'm going to see if it works for my numbers, not just for your numbers. And don't worry so much about decimal places in the same way that you would in the input program. We'll take care of those little items to clean it up later on. All right, again, you want to have your Java software, and if you remember from the other video, or hopefully from your reading, if you do read the textbook, which I hope you do, you'll know that there are some special pre-designed packages within Java that are called classes that you can use to make program writing more powerful. That's how we create video games so rapidly. That's because they use special small programs that allow writing to be faster. We, instead of reinventing the wheel, we'll use stuff that's already been created that works. For example, when you're using your phone, you have special apps for storing your phone numbers, for calculating the tip at a restaurant. Why use pencil and paper and torture yourself when you can use the software, use the little apps that are with it to make your life easier? And so we do the same thing here through something called classes. There happens to be a class, and if you want to refer, as the instruction sheet says, to pages 92 to 98 in your book, you will have that information to refer to. They use a class here called Swing, and for this particular program, what we'll use, and again, I said this in the last video, I'll say it again here, you want to look at my guide for writing programs. You have the basic shell that I've already talked about for a Java program for beginning students. And when we're dealing with dialog boxes, sorry if I'm making you dizzy with this scrolling, you can use these sentences that I have to start out for your program. Now, for those of you who are very exact words type students, you need to read this and think through it. I'm not writing a clone that you just simply copy and paste, so you need to understand that right off the bat. That's part of the thinking process that students have to do. The first statement you want to use when you're dealing with dialog boxes in Java at all to get those classes in there is one called import. The name of the import statement, which is at the top of page 97 if you want an easy reference, is javax or javax.swing.jOptionPane. Now the computer, Java, is very particular about spacing and about lower and uppercase letters. Those are the first mistakes that most students make, and especially if they don't want to think. No offense intended. They'll send me messages or they'll raise their hand in class a lot and say, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And it's usually something like that. You've got to read through this and think through the process, especially when you're online. And if you're very insecure or nervous or just need that guidance initially, you may need to make an appointment with a partner or a tutor if they tutor Java, or with me personally if you need to do that. We can also do it over the phone if you like. That's your first sentence, is the import statement. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that Java shell in there. You can type it in the long way if you like, and that's probably good practice. Or you can use the shell that I've given to you and copy and paste. You do whatever works for you personally. As I'm creating this video, I'm going ahead and copying and pasting this. I've got to give my program a name right here. Just use something that's very descriptive. In this particular case, I will use something, since I'm dealing with computer costs and buying something in the store, I'm going to call it purchase. You can call it anything you like. I'll say purchase computer. Now, if you make the name again, you cannot put spaces in there. You can only use alphanumeric characters, alphabet characters A through Z, digits 0 through 9, and the underscore if you want to use that. So I'm calling mine purchase computer. When I save this, I am required to name it purchase computer. I can't have two different names in Java. Everything you type from this point on will go in between these innermost braces that are following the public static void main sentence. Go after that brace and inside it, right where my insertion point is at the moment. And the first thing that happens right here, again, I will attempt to put this in such a way, if I can do this, so that you can see both screens at once. And you'll have to bear with me as I go through this as I'm creating the video. It's a little bit tricky to try to do all this at one time, but I'll do my best. So I'm talking so you will not think the video has stopped. I'll have students who are very comfortable with computers and others who are extremely nervous. Depends on you, your personality, your learning style, the whole spiel. And those who know me in a non-online environment know that I'm all about learning styles and patience and stuff like that. All right, it says to ask the user to input his or her name from an input dialog box. Well, the routine is pretty much the same. If you're using an input dialog box, again, I can use that guide that I provided for you in the help link in Blackboard. If I'm inputting stuff not from a keyboard but from a dialog box, I can go to this part right here. It depends on whether you're entering numbers or whether you're entering words or what have you. So I will use this one, and I'll pull this where you can see it a little bit better. Let's go for strings being entered in a dialog box. The first thing I need to do is to declare a string variable. I always have to have variables. I know for sure in this program that I'm going to have a variable for my name, so I'll call it name, and the data type with it is string because that deals with alphabet characters. I'm going to deal with the computer cost, and you have the choice here of whether you want to use an integer or a double. If you're using decimals, possibly, I would use double. The thing I like about double is double will allow you to use both integers without decimals and numbers with decimals, where integer restricts you to whole numbers only, basically whole numbers and their negatives. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to call this tax rate, and that's also going to be a double because it's a decimal value, so I'll use that one. And those are my three variables. Now, if I want to get these in through a dialog box, what I have to do first is use a feature of my J option pane. And I'm kind of writing this backwards at first, so that, again, those of you into exact words, just bear with me. And if you look on page 97, you got a great reference for this. Tony Gaddis writes a very good book. All right, so I'm going to use a statement called jOptionPane.show input dialog box. What this does is it displays one of those dialog boxes that you always see in Windows and Apple where it says, do you want to print or do you want to leave this program? And it's got, usually it'll have OK and cancel. That's a dialog box right there where you're interacting with the computer. And I want to know what I want to print inside that dialog box. So I'm going to ask the person, what is your name? I'll put that in quotes. What is your name? And I'll end that with my quote semicolon. Again, the punctuation is very picky in Java. And I want to store that information in my variable called name. So what happens is this dialog box will pop up. It will give me a box that will let me type in my name, Michael in my case. And that word Michael will be stored inside a variable called name. And that's all I have to do in this case. Everything inside a dialog box, no matter how it looks to you and me, is considered a string value. So when I'm dealing with another situation, and if I look at my directions again in that situation, the second dialog box is where I'm entering the cost of the computer. Now when I enter the cost of the computer in the second dialog box, it's going to be very similar to what I already have. And again, use that guide sheet if you need it. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use a new variable that I haven't declared yet. I'm going to use something here in my variable declaration. It's a string. I'm going to call it input string. Now in my handout I used str. Your book uses input string. You can call it anything you want to. I'm going to use str because it's shorter to type. The book uses, and I'm just going to make a little comment out to the side if you're looking at this and if you're highly visual. Input string is used in your textbook. I'm going to make this simple because I don't want to type so much for you. So to get that value, I'm going to type in str equals. I'm going to do the very same thing I did earlier. J option pane. Again, be careful about the uppercase, lowercase, and all that. That's very picky. Show input dialog. And I'll say, how much did the computer cost without tax? And if I were really doing this with, I'll leave it like that. All right. Now, normally, and again, what will happen when you type in this number, and you'll see this visually in just a moment, when you type in this number, it will look okay, but it's not okay with Java. It's going to store this value as a string, and what I have to do is I have to use something in Java, another class, to convert the string value to another data type. I can convert a string to a decimal number, or I can convert a string to an integer. Again, your guide sheet, if you need it, and lots of people use these when they're writing programs, is not a sign of intelligence or lack of. It's just a guide that everybody uses. When you're dealing with a decimal value, you will use the JInput dialog box and then assign whatever variable is going to hold your number, and you have to do something called a parse statement. Again, a lot of this is very confusing at first. You just have to accept it in Java initially until you get used to the language, and for some people it takes longer than it does for others. So I'll use a statement. I'm using the variable that I had just a minute ago, and I'm going to change that word computer. I probably should have used the word cost. That's going to be better. I'm going to use the word cost there. Thank you for letting me, not that you had any choice, but thank you for letting me change my mind there. So cost is going to equal, and again, use your guide sheet and use page 97 as examples if you need them. I'm going to use a class called double, which is a capital letter, .parse double. And again, I have to assume you've read some of this prior to now, and str. Now I'll explain this since I'll kind of break it down for you. What this statement does, it takes a special wrapper class called double. It takes the value in str. Remember when I typed in, or when I type in my cost of the computer, it stores it in a string variable called str, because that's what dialog boxes do. They consider everything as strings, nothing calculated. I have to take that value that I put in str and convert it to a decimal, and I store that value in the variable called cost. And since cost is double, I've now converted it from a string to a decimal value that the computer can do arithmetic on. So these sentences sort of go as a team, if you please. They don't have to be spaced apart. They can be put together. It's totally up to you. Now for the tax rate, I'll do exactly the same thing. I can use that very same str. It's perfectly fine. Again, it's kind of like what I said in the previous video. It's like a doctor's office waiting room where you got a lot of people in there, and once you have that one person that's been seen by the doctor, then he leaves. Then that patient leaves that room, and a new person comes in. That's what string is. Kind of like that little waiting room before the doctor comes to check on you. And I'll do the very same thing I did earlier. What is the tax rate? And I'm going to make the prompt very precise in decimal form, so I won't have to deal with writing a percent there. And I'll do the very same thing. The only difference is I'm going to take the variable called tax rate that I had right here. It's going to look like the previous two sentences almost exactly, except I'm going to take the value in this dialog box, and I'm practically writing this program for you. I realize that, and that's okay for this particular situation because it also forces you, it also gives you the advantage of saying, hey, I watched Mike's video, and boy, did it help me. Okay? Now, I'm going to stop right there and just run that much of the program. All I'm doing is inputting the information into the computer, and I want you to see what happens. So when I run this Java program, I have to save it, I have to compile it, which is checking it for mistakes, and it takes the compiled program that has no errors called a .class program, and it will execute it for me. So I'm going to click on Tools and choose Compile Current Document. I'm using Dr. Java. Your Eclipse or whatever software you're using may be a little different. And it's going to give me an error message right here. It says the public type purchase computer must be defined as its own file. And I'm going, whoa, what does that mean? Let me go ahead and save this first. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call it Purchase Computer, and it will put a .java at the end of it. I'm going to save that and see what happens when I run it this time, see if I get that same message. All right, I got some warnings here. It's because I haven't used all the variables yet, and that's perfectly okay. It shouldn't hurt anything for right now. I'm going to go ahead and run it just to let you see how this works. And what will happen, do you see where it created this dialog box? It did that because of the statement right here called name. It gave me that little dialog box. Let me see if I can bring that dialog box back to the front end so you can see it. And thank you for bearing with me as I create this video not so formally. Alright, when I type in my name, it will be stored in the variable that's called name. So I'll type in the word Michael right there. I'll click OK to move forward. The next dialog box that pops up is because of the second J input statement. It says how much did the computer cost. I'll type in 500. Okay, and the third dialog box will come up. What's the tax rate? You get the idea how this works. Now that I've done that, I'm going, oh my gosh, okay, now how in the world, and I've done part of this program already, I've satisfied the requirements of part of this program. And I hope if you're watching this video and using this as a guide, I hope that you will not type exactly word for word what I have, but that you'll be creative and not put the exact phrases that I have. What is the tax rate? You might make it a little bit of a variant, so at least I know you've done something on your own instead of just imitating mine completely, character for character. All right, you want to then calculate the total cost of the computer and display that in something called a message dialog box. I'm going to show you a message dialog box as well. And again, this is on page 97 and it is in your guide sheet. If you will look at the guide sheet, I should have a message dialog box. Yeah, right here. It tells how to do that. You use something called JOptionPane dot show message dialog. And I'll do that. JOptionPane dot, again, this is on page 97 and on your study sheet, on your guide sheet on in the help section of Blackboard if you need it. Dot show message dialog. You guys spell everything correctly and be very precise with it. It opens up with an opening parenthesis with the word null. And I can type in something like the cost of the computer is. If you remember from the print statement, anytime I'm dealing with a switch over from words or characters to a variable name or variable content, I've got to separate with a plus, and the same thing happens in here. I'm going to just put this dialog box just to let you see what happens. The cost of the computer is, and I got the word cost there. Just look at the syntax, the way it's been typed out with all the punctuation and capitalization and stuff, and see if it makes sense to you. I'll compile this one again just to let you see how this looks visually. It should run just fine, even though I've got the warnings. I haven't made a complete program. I've written my programs for this homework, but I'm not showing them to you because you need to try to do it on your own. What is my name? How much did the computer cost? These are just my input boxes because it says the word input up there. Let's say the tax rate is 0.05. Now, I haven't done any calculations, but you notice that the message dialog box has the word message on top of it as the title, and it says the cost of the computer is $500. Don't worry about the extra decimal place. It's okay. Notice the space is not there between the word is and the word 500. We can take care of that by putting a space inside the quotes after the letter S. You can put as much space as you want to, and it will put that space in there when you run the program. Now, what you want to do right here is you want to make a sentence that calculates the total cost of the computer. So you may want to have another variable here that's called total. And you have to make a statement. You don't have to do this with a dialog box because you're not asking for information. You've got everything you need. You need to know, okay, how do I compute that total? I'll tell you folks, it's not cost plus tax rate. It's not 500 plus decimal 05, or it'd be $500.05. You have to do some arithmetic there, and I'll leave that part up to you. But you get the idea of how this works. Now again, just as a refresher, when you send this to me in Blackboard, what you have to do is you'll look into where you saved your information, and you want to look for a file that you're sending to me that is called a .java file. I've given an example in the handout, but I'll show you right here. You want to send the name that has .java after it. Do not send me the one that says class. Do not send the one that's got the little squiggly tilde line in there. They will not run properly. Again, if you need help additionally beyond the video, you need to make an appointment with me, call me on the phone, send me an email or a message. Don't just say, I don't understand. Because as I say in class often, some people, I can fill that in with, I don't understand why the sky is blue, or I don't understand where babies come from. You've got to give me something specific. You can't say, I don't understand anything about Java. That doesn't help me help you, because I don't know at what point you were good and at what point you dropped off the Java wagon. You've got to, I can't help you if you are not specific, and it may be an in-person or a phone conversation that's necessary. Again, adults have to take that responsibility at this level for their education. Please contact me if this doesn't help you as much as you need it, and hopefully the video has helped some.